Welcome back for another Sheriff of Sodium video. Well, I really decided to kick the hornet's nest this time, didn't I? Last time we were together, I decided to talk about something that I've been thinking about and worrying about quite a bit lately, which is that the stage is now set for AI to replace many physician jobs because, in large part, the technology is there and the incentives for the tech companies are there, and there's a time-worn and well-accepted political argument available that can be used to take down the last remaining guardrails. Let's just say that many of you were not happy with me for choosing to talk about this topic in the manner that I did. I've gotten a lot of feedback and pushback about the video, and I'll be honest, a lot of it was reactionary and silly and short-sighted and illogical and honestly pretty well aligned with the kind of low-quality arguments that inspired me to make that video in the first place. But there were also a number of points that were smart, insightful, deserving of some additional discussion, or maybe a more thorough argument or rebuttal from me. And so what I'm going to do today is explore some of that. But before I get into all that, the first order of business is an apology. You know, there are people who really, really don't like every single video that I make. And I'm okay with that. I mean, this is not Cocomelon. I try to talk about things that I think are important or misunderstood, and often those topics are at least somewhat controversial. But as a matter of principle, I try to speak honestly about them. I say what I think and I mean what I say, and often, I say it in a provocative way because I am trying to get you to change your mind or at least think more deeply about the way that things are. So people tell me that I'm wrong or that I suck. It really doesn't hurt my feelings. But for this video in particular, I did have a couple of people who reached out to me and shared that they thought I went too far, that my tone and word choice and memification of good faith arguments was off-putting or crass or even cruel. So that's what I want to talk about first, because I think they're right. I listened to the video again, and I was ruder than I meant to be. This is an issue where smart and reasonable people can disagree, and I don't have a crystal ball that's any more clear than anyone else's, so I want to apologize. My goal here, as always, is to make you think, and ultimately to make our systems better. And I'm not going to walk around on eggshells or tiptoe around speaking the truth just because if I do, it might make someone somewhere offended that the truth was spoken. But my intention is not to demean or denigrate my colleagues, and for that, I want you to know that I'm sorry. And yes, I know that most of the people who are offended won't hear this, but a man's got to have a code, and I don't think I lived up to mine in the way that I initially discussed this topic. So in this video, I'm going to try to speak a little more evenly, and I'm going to go light on the memes, and I'm going to avoid the caveman voice, and so on. But that doesn't mean that I'm backing off on my conclusions, which I still believe to be substantially correct. And to convince you of that, I want to offer some additional and acknowledge some insightful points that you all have made, and hopefully add some depth and nuance to this topic. So let's get into it. First up, let me address an objection. You don't understand my job. So let me concede that. I don't. I have really only the vaguest idea of what a radiologist or an ophthalmologist or a dermatologist or an anesthesiologist or a geriatric neurointerventional proctologist does on a day-to-day basis. But I don't think the argument I'm making here requires that I understand any of that. So let me be very clear about what I'm saying. I think we can all agree that there are many physician tasks that AI can't easily do, and there are others that society is unlikely to allow AI to do, at least not without supervision. AI is going to struggle more than a physician when a patient shows up in the ED and doesn't know why they're there. I don't know, as some of you pointed out, how AI is going to competently manage the patient with mental illness smearing feces on the wall. AI is not going to do the paracentesis or reduce a nursemaid's elbow or do a total hip arthroplasty or a hemicolectomy. But we don't have to get into a shouting match about what specific tasks AI can or can't do, because really all it comes down to is this. If 100% of your job is composed of tasks that are physical or so complicated or high stakes that AI will never be able to do it or be allowed to do it, then that's great. I mean, you win the argument. If your position is that 0% of your job could ever be replaced by AI, then I agree. AI won't replace you. But if the number is anything more than that, you might have a problem. And my position is, without knowing the nuts and bolts of every single physician's job, my position is that a non-zero percentage of any physician's job can be replaced by AI. And if you concede that, then I think you ought to think through the implications of it for just a few minutes before you proclaim that AI is nothing to worry about. So think with me for a minute. We'll start with some easy ones. I mean, let's say that, I don't know, maybe 20% of the work in your AI-resistant field can be replaced by AI. But you still have 100% of the workforce that you have now. What's that going to do to your market position? I mean, do you think it's going to be easier or less easy to negotiate with your employer when there's a surplus of physicians in your specialty who now have some extra time on their hands? What's it going to do to your compensation? I mean, we can agree that the medical economy functions differently than many other segments of the economy, but it's still not some kind of anti-gravity zone where macroeconomic principles don't apply. And when supply increases and demand stays the same, prices fall. What's it going to do to your workday? Let's think what that's going to look like. I mean, it's going to be enriched with things that AI can't do. And on first pass, that sounds great, right? I mean, you're going to be practicing at the top of your license. And maybe it will be great. But what's going to happen to your primary care patient panel when all the patients with straightforward diabetes and hypertension and lipid management, now they see the bot? So you get to see the challenging and socially complex patients where just doing their medication reconciliation takes 30 minutes. But you still need to hit the same productivity targets to cover your overhead. I mean, maybe your workday as a psychiatrist or emergency medicine physician gets better if you don't have to worry about seeing patients whose diagnosis and management is simple and straightforward. But you may have a harder time hitting your WRVU targets when the only patients you're seeing are the ones who don't know why they're there or are smearing feces on the walls. So before you glibly forecast that AI can only make your job better, I think you need to take an honest and critical look at your practice. In real dollars, physician compensation is declining, and it has been for some time. Now, so far that's been offset by increases in productivity, but my impression is that almost all of us are turning the hamster wheel about as fast as we can, or at least as fast as we care to. And these days, the majority of physicians, they aren't in business for themselves. They're employed by large, metric-driven corporations with relatively slim margins. So what you really have to ask yourself is, will your employer's expectation for how productive they want you to be change with AI? And before you answer that question, you may want to pause and look around a little bit. AI may be the first technology that has the capacity to replace a certain amount of physician work, but there are innumerable examples of what occurs when a new technology does human work in other industries. I mean, when automobile manufacturing started to become automated, what happened to automobile workers? Did companies keep the same number of workers, or did they let some go? Did the human workers who stayed, did they get to clock out a little early, or did they get to work a little slower because the machines were now doing some of the stuff? No, of course not. Some workers became unnecessary, and those that remained necessary, they saw their jobs become more specialized and sophisticated, and they kept working just as hard or harder. The efficiency gains and extra profits go to the bosses, not to the workers. So if you're one of these people who believes that AI is only going to make your job easier, that it's just going to take care of some of your easy work and lighten your load and allow you to work at a more leisurely pace on tasks that are more satisfying to you, and despite all this, you're going to be compensated just as generously as you are now, well, I promised I wasn't going to make a meme or use a silly voice in this video, but I will put it to you that your viewpoint is naive and it's ahistorical, and actually it's probably willfully ignorant of the structure of the system in which most of us work right now. Next, another objection. AI can't do such and such. You fill in the blank. And I can't possibly get into all the things that the blank could be here. And honestly, I don't want to because, as I said a moment ago, it's kind of immaterial to the argument. If you think that AI can do a non-zero percentage of your work, you might have a problem. But really, one of the striking things to me in some of the comments and emails and direct messages that I got was that a good number of things that people said that AI can't do are actually things that AI can do and is doing right now. So, this is a good opportunity to do your own research. Poke around in your field and see what things you do that AI can actually do right now. You may be humbled. And for any purely cognitive task, I will put it to you not just that you may be humbled, but that you will be. I challenged several commenters to tell me about a challenging decision or diagnosis that they'd made in their own practice, and we could see together if a bot would get it right. I offered to feed an honest and reasonable prompt to ChatGPT right now, consisting only of information that the bot could reasonably have been expected to have access to, and I said that I would post the ChatGPT output verbatim. No one took me up on this. And if it's not a purely cognitive task, before you say a bot can't do it, use your imagination for just a moment. Pretend instead of a doctor that you're an engineer working for the tech companies and you're just trying to solve a problem. I mean, many things that on first pass you say, oh, AI can't do this, well, it actually could do them pretty easily with a relatively small input from a non-physician human. I mean, I think some people have a very narrow vision of what an AI doctor looks like. It doesn't necessarily have to be the patient sitting at a screen typing and telling the bot everything it needs to know. I mean, you could have a non-physician sitting at a computer screen and the bot listening and directing the person what they should ask. We could have a medical assistant appropriately position patients for an eye exam or a radiology study, or take pictures of a rash or some other physical exam finding. We could have a paramedic place an IV. They do that all the time. They could intubate a patient, and then they could turn over that case to an AI anesthesiologist for a straightforward outpatient case. Now, maybe you disagree with these examples, but I hope you see the point that I'm getting at. There are a lot of things that AI could do, but they're tied, at least in the current model, to some small but critical human skill. But in many of those cases, that required human skill could be performed by someone who's less expensive than a physician. As I said a moment ago, there are certain physician tasks that AI can't do well, and there are others that society won't allow AI to do unsupervised. But really, I think there are way more of the latter than the former, which is why the guardrails that I discussed in the first video are so important. Here's another frequent objection. AI will come for other fields first, because medicine's so complex. I mean, why would AI replace us when there's so many other people that it could replace first? But please, I want you to think for just a moment before you accept this argument. Because what tasks get automated, it isn't just a function of the ease of automation. It's also a function of how lucrative it is to automate that thing. There are technical considerations and regulatory considerations, sure, but don't forget the business side. Healthcare is an enormous market. In 2023, it totaled $4.9 trillion, or 17.9% of the entire U.S. GDP. And of that 17.9%, around 8.6% goes to physicians. So if you do the math, that means that around 1.5% of our entire GDP goes to doctors. Let me put that another way. 1.5 cents out of every dollar spent in our entire economy ends up in doctors' bank accounts, which amounts to somewhere between $400 and $500 billion. So, does that sound like an appealing business target to you? I guess more to the point, do you think it sounds like an appealing target to the kind of venture capitalists and high-powered investors who back AI companies? I mean, these folks want high returns. They're not interested in investing in savings bonds. They want to see their investment come back many times over, and they'll fund a moonshot to get it. So let's say that your AI doctor, let's say that it replaces just 10% of this market. 10% of this $400 to $500 billion market. Well, now you've got a business that's more valuable than the entire U.S. golf industry. I'm talking about course operations, equipment, apparel, media rights, the whole thing. You would have a business that's more valuable than the entire U.S. cosmetic and skincare industry. Take that, influencers. You would have a business that's worth as much as the entire California wine industry. And it would be more valuable than the entire US market for potatoes and chicken combined. And that's with just a 10% replacement. If this occurs, whoever wins this market isn't just going to be rich. They're going to become one of the richest people on the planet. Maybe even the richest person who's ever lived. But you still think that they're going to pursue a plodding, incremental, start with all the easy stuff strategy? I'm not so sure. Let me move on to another one. AI won't replace you, but a doctor who knows how to use AI might. I heard this several times, and I'm going to be honest, I don't really understand what this means. I mean, it seems to me like a matter of semantics. Oh, bro, I heard you lost your job. What happened? Did you get replaced by AI? No, I got replaced by a doctor who knew how to use AI. I mean, I promised you I was going to try to keep the phaser set to stun here. But if there's a meaningful difference between a doctor being replaced by AI and a doctor being replaced by a doctor who knows how to use AI, please illuminate that for me in the comments below. But actually what I wanted to talk about here was some of the argument that I think is valuable that often followed this kind of assertion, which was that AI companies don't want to replace physicians, that they actually would prefer a business model where they're just helping doctors and selling to them, not replacing them. So let's think about that for a moment. Let's say that you're a venture capitalist who wants to get a piece of that $400 to $500 billion market we were just talking about. And I'm an AI entrepreneur who's about to pitch you a few different business models. And I'm going to give you 3, and we can Shark Tank it a little bit, and you can tell me which one you think is the most appealing. Business plan number 1 is that we could sell our product to individual doctors. And let's assume that for this option, our product is going to be something totally non-threatening to physicians. It's not going to replace them. It's only going to make them smarter or faster. It'll double check their CT reads or scribe and upcode their notes or, I don't know, diagnose the rash they're looking at or monitor the patient that's under anesthesia or whatever. But in return for this, we're going to ask individual physicians to pay for a subscription. You like this model? I mean, it could work, but I think it's got a few soft spots. First off, if you want a huge return on investment and not just some ultra niche product that you're going to be able to sell to a few thousand subspecialists, you're going to need to come up with something very generalized that lots of people can use. Second, to get them to use it, you're going to have to spend a lot on marketing, on advertising and salespeople who are going to come to your office and show you how well the thing works and get you to trust it and eventually overcome the friction and get you to get out your credit card and put in the numbers and actually pay for a subscription. But I think there's at least one more problem too. How much do you think you're going to be able to charge for this subscription? I mean, how much do you think the average physician is going to be willing to pay? I mean, it depends, right? I mean, suppose an AI solution makes me 20% faster, or it increases my billing by 20%. How much should a rational physician be willing to pay? I mean, the answer is something less than 20% of their salary, right? I mean, if I pay 20% of my take-home pay to a bot that helps me do 20% more work, I would have been just as well off to not pay for it and work less, and I would have had just as much money at the end of the day. So let's try a different option. Business plan number 2. Instead of selling our product to individual doctors, now let's sell it to hospitals. It probably will lower our marketing costs, right? Because, I mean, there's around 1 million individual doctors in the United States, but there's only around 6,000 hospitals. So we're going to have a lot fewer individual customers to focus on. And honestly, hospitals are more sophisticated buyers. They got business people and administrators that are used to analyzing the financial bottom line. I mean, imagine trying to sell something to some set-in-their-ways surgeon who does things the way they do them, and that's that. But I think you're still going to be up against that third problem that I mentioned a moment ago. I mean, how much are hospitals going to be willing to pay? Your revenue with this product and this business model, it's necessarily constrained by the marginal value of the service you provide. So even in a pie-in-the-sky, absolute best-case scenario, where every single hospital subscribes to your service and no other AI product is competing with you on price, you're still going to have a hard ceiling on your income potential because your service has to add value for the customer well beyond the amount that the customer is paying you. So now let's think about a third business model where instead of making a non-threatening product that requires supervision and needs doctors to sign off on its outputs or its decisions, in this business model, we're going to replace the doctor. Instead of just making something to help doctors be more efficient, we're going to cut the doctor out altogether. Because then we get to keep 100% of the efficiency gains, plus we get to do all the billing that the doctor had been doing before. Several of you have argued that AI corporations will prefer options 1 and 2 because they're easier paths. I mean, a company that pursues those paths, they can get to market quicker, and they can make money without as much scrutiny as if they were selling standalone robot doctors. And I think those are valid points. Option C is costlier. I mean, you're going to have to pay for lobbying and fixing and wheel greasing just to overcome the initial regulatory hurdles, and you're going to have higher ongoing costs related to liability. But the reward of taking all the doctor's fees instead of settling for a tiny piece of the pie is just so much greater that I think companies will pursue it. Actually, I can't imagine them not pursuing it. I mean, there is a reason that people invest in moonshot startups, and it's not just to make money. I mean, if all you want is a reasonable return on your investment, you could invest in municipal bonds or start renting out self-storage units or franchising Arby's. But if you want to become rich beyond your wildest dreams, you got to have something different. I told you about the size of the market here. What other untapped market has this kind of upside? I mean, all you need is a bot with an NPI number, and the kingdom can be yours. More than anything else, I think this is what many people are missing. Instead of pointing out that AI can't do some particular task and then thinking that this observation is sufficient to predict the behavior of an entire highly complex system, try to see the whole playing field. And I admit it's hard to predict the future. Human beings have free will, and human beings are delightfully unpredictable. To quote the late, great Norm Macdonald, you get to eat at Denny's, wear a hat, whatever you want to do. I mean, it's impossible to predict what any of us are going to do at a given moment. So how do we do it? What's our approach? I mean, how can we possibly make sense of a system that consists of hundreds of millions of us and each of the individual actions and reactions and responses that ultimately make up the scaffolding of these complex systems? I mean, at a given moment, humans are unpredictable, but over any time horizon, we all engage in goal-directed behavior that's driven by the incentives to get what we want. And when you look at it that way, it gives us the proper framework for trying to answer these kinds of big, really unanswerable questions. So my argument, in its most stripped-down form, really comes down to these 3 premises. Number 1, AI can replace a non-zero amount of physician work. I think the technical capability is there. You don't have to accept this premise. Like I said, if you think that 0% of your job can be replaced, then we can stop right here and just agree to disagree. But if you think the number is anything north of that, then we need to think about whether this replacement is going to occur. So to begin to do that, we look at the incentives. And the second piece of my argument is that AI companies have a strong incentive to replace physicians. As I said, this is an enormous market. Just replacing 10% of physicians would give you more revenue than all of the United States corn and soybean exports combined. The incentive exists, so we should expect that people will pursue it. And that brings me to my third piece, which is that AI companies have the power and leverage to pursue their incentives and achieve their objectives. Because just having an incentive doesn't mean that you're going to get it. I mean, everybody else is pursuing their incentives too. So who wins? And in general, it's whoever has the most power or is smartest about applying the power that they have in a way that creates the most leverage. And I think the companies we're talking about, they have the money and they know how to influence politicians and thought leaders. So yeah, I think the guardrails are coming down. If you still think I'm wrong, that's okay. But please tell me why. Don't try to talk around what I'm saying here. If you accept these premises, I really don't know how you're going to reach a different conclusion than I did, uncomfortable as that may be. But let me move on and discuss a couple of other comments. We've heard this before. Many viewers seemed to find an unusual amount of comfort in the fact that some people have said computers would replace doctors at some point in the past, and yet here we are. Some of these people even made specific predictions about the year in which this would occur, and so far, all of those people have been wrong. But if you can't see the logical fallacy here, I don't know how much I can help you. I mean, as my dad used to say, nothing has ever happened until it happens. I mean, no one's ever gotten a speeding ticket until they get one. No one ever had diabetes until, they have it. The fact that something that could have happened didn't really provides no protection against that thing happening in the future. Now, if your argument is that the people who made these predictions and were wrong in the past were missing something fundamental, something that they didn't realize, but you do, and this thing actually makes it impossible to ever occur, then I really would love to hear about that in the comments. But if your argument really is just that they underestimated the pace of technological progress, I don't find that very reassuring. I think the right way to assess the likelihood of whether something is going to occur is to assess that thing on its own merits. I mean, if I want to know if the Yankees are going to win the World Series, there's a lot of things I could analyze. But whether people predicted that they were going to win it in previous years and they didn't really isn't relevant or helpful. What I need to know is what's the situation right now. And the situation right now for computers is that they can do things that they simply could not before. The computers that these experts were looking at in the 1990s or 2000s or even 2010s, those things were purpose-built and algorithmic. AI now is generalized and autonomous. So what do you think about that? The business incentives are also different. I mean, you can't become a billionaire anymore by making a word processing system or disrupting some easily disrupted industry. The targets are harder, but the tech engine nowadays has a lot more momentum behind it. So instead of acting as though someone being wrong before is some kind of checkmate, I really would be much more interested in hearing your assessment of what is going on right now. Next, yeah, but what's the time frame? This was a common sentiment also. One person emailed me and pointed out that Leonardo da Vinci drew up a blueprint for a helicopter in the 1480s, but it took nearly 500 years for the tech to catch up. Others made an analogy to flying cars, which might be something that we could all agree probably at some point will exist, but it's probably also safe to say you don't need to clear out space in your garage just yet. If AI is replacing us in 3 years, that's one thing. But if it's not going to happen for 33 years, does it matter that much to the people that are watching this video? So the question is, how fast is all this going to happen? And before I get into that, I think I do need to correct a misunderstanding about what some people think physician replacement by AI is going to look like. It's not binary. I think some of you think that what I'm saying is that one day all the radiologists are just going to leave the office and turn out the light and say, well, boys, it was good while it lasted. And then the next day they're going to turn on the lights and it's just going to be robots in the reading room. That's not what AI replacement is going to look like. It's going to be more gradual. First, they're going to wedge open a regulatory doorway. And then maybe we'll start with, low-risk chest x-rays. But it won't take long till we get commoditized workflows and AI triaged imaging pipeline. And by the time you look up, radiologists are going to have fewer second reads and fewer overnight shifts. And before you know it, the hospital only needs 3 radiologists instead of 5. The replacement that I see coming is economic and structural. We'll have doctors, sure. But will the experience and rewards of being a doctor be the same as they have been in the past? No, they won't. And as for when this will occur, I think within 10 years, it will be absolutely unmistakable that this is occurring. And within 15 or 20, we will have reached a new equilibrium. Next, you don't understand hallucinations. Several of you took issue with my rebuttal to the "but AI hallucinates" argument, because on the way to my actual point, I suggested that to me this seemed like an engineering problem that would be worked out over time. And instead, many of you graciously took the time to explain to me that this is an intrinsic property of large language models, that no one really understands why it occurs, and that it's unlikely to ever go away. So I appreciate you educating me on that. But no one really challenged my real point here, which, what I said after that statement was, even with hallucinations, who do you think has a higher error rate right now? A bot or a human? But rather than just answering that as a thought experiment, I want to share this paper, which one viewer messaged to me, that gives some real data to answer that question. I'm going to link to it in the notes below. The paper describes how a Google product called Articulate Medical Intelligence Explorer, or AMI, how this thing compared when it went head-to-head with real primary care physicians in an objective clinical skills examination. So in this experiment, the bot had to take history, look at photographs of skin findings, interpret ECG tracings, review PDFs of medical records, the whole thing. So who do you think won? Who do you think did better? It was the bot on almost every dimension. This graphic shows the overall performance. The red line is the bot, the blue line is PCPs. And again, these are real PCPs and a bot that exists right now. But the bot had better reasoning. It was more likely to get the most likely diagnosis. It created better management plans. It escalated care more often when it needed to. The bot was also perceived as being more empathetic, honest, and trustworthy. And the standardized patients said that they were more likely to revisit the bot than the actual PCPs. But what's interesting, though, is that hallucinations occurred. And sometimes it wasn't just the bot hallucinating. The PCPs hallucinated too. They included details that hadn't been mentioned by the patient, or they made incorrect assumptions, and they were actually more likely than the bot to see things that weren't there on the ECG. But overall, the differences in hallucination between Amy and the real doctors, those differences weren't statistically significant, and you can see who did better overall. It's important to point out that we hold computers to a different standard than humans. When computers make mistakes, they tend to make different kinds of mistakes than humans. So to us, those mistakes seem especially silly. I mean, that's why when a Waymo gets confused and stops in the middle of an intersection and blocks traffic, people take a video and we all chuckle. But when a human being kills themselves or someone else driving drunk, that story doesn't even always make the local news. But is that always going to be the case? I mean, suppose hallucination rates remain exactly where they are right now, which, as I just told you, was similar to the real physician's error rates. But this is healthcare we're talking about. We're talking about people's lives. So do you think that patients and policymakers are always going to have a preference for the kind of dumb mistakes that doctors make? Or do you think that they'll just demand fewer mistakes from whoever the doctor is? And before you answer that, you might want to think about a couple of things. The first one is that study that I just showed you, the error rates were similar, but remember, the bot's output was better. So even with some hallucination, the bottom line for patients was less influenced by the mistakes than it was for the human PCPs. Second thing to consider is that even if hallucination always exists, I still think AI bots are only going to get better. One commenter pointed out that whatever AI you have today, it's the worst AI that will likely ever exist from this point forward. And the third is, right now, we're comparing AI to doctors who were trained in the classical manner. They honed their observational skills and reasoning in an era without AI. But what do you think is going to happen in 5 or 10 years when having AI everywhere, all the time, softens up all of our collective brains? I mean, are occasional AI hallucinations going to matter as much when the gold standard to which it gets compared is tarnished? Let me continue to build on all this by highlighting not an objection, but a comment that deserves more discussion. Is it ethical to oppose AI replacement? This is an economic topic, and so I've been talking about it in economic terms, but Practicing medicine isn't just economic activity. We have a duty to act in the best interests of our patients and give them the best possible care. It's not ethical to give a patient antiquated therapies that are inferior to modern care just for your own economic benefit. I mean, you can't tell a patient with a peptic ulcer that they should let you do a Billroth instead of just giving them a PPI, even if the surgery would generate more work RVUs. So, what are we going to do when AI does something better than we do, which it's doing right now? I think the only right answer is we have to get out of the way. Let me hit just two more and then I'll close. Every other job will be gone too. This was also a common comment, that by the time that AI replaces doctors, it'll be something akin to the heat death of the universe. The logic seems to be there won't be any other jobs, so worrying about that kind of thing is pointless. But I think that argument misses a couple of things. The first is, I never told you to change jobs. I mean, listen to that whole video. I never said that. I never said that anybody should switch specialties. I said that if there are multiple specialties that you like equally, you can consider their AI replaceability as a tiebreaker. What I'm saying is, I think all this is coming, and in my opinion, people who don't see that, they aren't looking critically at the big picture. Second, I think this nihilistic attitude misses that there will be opportunities, both for you personally and for all of us collectively, to slow or shape how this replacement occurs. And make no mistake, I'm not cheering for this to happen. I've put in a lot of time and toil to try to build skills that could bring some good into people's lives. And I'd like to keep doing this for as long as I'm able. But I guess if you want to say whatever happens, happens, and do nothing to protect the career you love or position yourself to be able to love it longer, I mean, that's fine with me. Last, but what about the environment? Several of you thoughtfully commented about the environmental impact of AI, which is something that I didn't get into, but it deserves at least a moment of discussion because they're vast and far-reaching. Computers don't run on nothing. They require enormous amounts of energy to make them work and an increasing volume of water to keep them cool as our human use continues to grow rapidly. And all of this results in massive CO2 emissions, and it raises serious questions about how sustainable an AI-based future really could be. But beyond just acknowledging the seriousness of that, I did want to highlight how this issue actually suggests what I think is the best argument against AI replacing human doctors. Because the argument I made to you hinges on number two, that there is right now a huge economic incentive to replace physicians, and I made the case for why I believe that to be true. But what if those economic incentives changed? What if electricity and water become more expensive? If the costs of running a giant AI physician brain become more expensive than the value of replacing all the little individual physician brains, why would you do it? The value would no longer be there. Now, some of you are not going to like to hear this next part, but the same analysis also applies to the other side of the equation. What if the monetary value of replacing physicians becomes substantially less? If physicians' professional fees become some fraction of what they are right now, will it still make sense to go through all this trouble to replace them? And honestly, AI or no AI, I think that's where we're headed. I simply don't believe that physicians in the future will be anywhere near as generously compensated as our predecessors were, or even anywhere near as generously compensated as we are today. The amount of money that our country spends on healthcare continues to rise and is approaching nearly 20% of our GDP. I mean, how high do you think it can go? I'm not going to get into all the reasons why, at least in this video, but physician compensation is one of the easiest places to trim costs, and all it takes is the stroke of a legislative pen, and it can happen overnight. I feel very confident that this will occur, maybe suddenly, more likely gradually, but when it does, especially if it's paired with climbing costs, then it could change the value proposition for the tech companies. So if you've stuck with me through round two, all I can say is thank you. I really do appreciate your viewership and your engagement, even the pushback. And for now, that's all I've got. See you next time.